you got heaps, bro.
Kia ora te whānau. So this is week 4, breaking down some readings for our response journal. I've got my 2 friends here. I'll let them introduce themselves.
Kia ora, kore tāne ahau, he uri nei ngā te tūwhare toa manaai te marae.
True, I'm Karma. I grew up in Tamaki Makaurau, but from the East Coast and the Hokianga.
Nice. So Karma's already doing her masters, and me and Ritani are doing the same paper here, starting our masters.
Yes.
And we're going to be looking at one of the week 4 readings, the reflections on research with, for, and among Indigenous people by Charles R. Menzies. So there's sort of 3 parts we're going to sort of break down. So the first one is coming on. This is all on page 21, or what I've pulled out of page 21. So it says there, it's talking about like positionality on Aboriginal peoples as opposed to with Aboriginal or with us. So talking about research on instead of with. And so it goes here. One can only assume that these individuals self-consciously reject the need to accord real respect in Indigenous peoples, and that they continue to benefit from subjugation of Indigenous peoples. So subjugation, probably going to add it to my kupu bank. That's what I'm calling my glossary. Kupu bank. So subjugation, the action of bringing someone or something under control. So just want to talk about that, sort of the positionality and giving researchers giving themselves self-power.
Bro, is that like controlling the narrative almost? Like, is that what it's sort of?
Yep.
So the researcher could be an outsider.
Yeah.
But through the mahi that the researcher is doing, then has the power to change and control the narrative and the.
Yeah. So okay. I think if you're working on Indigenous people rather than with, you can take things, or even if you look at a lot of Māori literature coming from like outsiders doing research on us, that they've taken certain points of our tikanga and stuff and sort of twisted it to like it's not actually ours. So they've sort of changed the context of our learning to suit their own.
So one of the readings that I did recently with Moana Jackson, he was talking about myth takes. And myth takes is like a term that's sort of taking our narratives and calling them myths and discounting them and stuff like that, because they already had their own biases of where they sort of felt the world came from. Yeah. And that stuff has been damaging for ages to the point now. What do you mean? Well, for like, we still have in all the libraries all of the books that talk about our conception of the world as myth and legend.
Māori myths and legends, right?
And when we use it in context, when we're speaking in Te Reo Māori, that stuff is not myth and legend. That is real for us now. Like, our gods exist now. Like, I can look outside and see our gods, you know? And so for me, that whole discounting of that was kind of really some of the real beginnings of like corruption. But I like what the reading says about, one can only assume, that there's that whole kōrero about research is a dirty word for Indigenous peoples, and that's exactly what sort of positionality is really sort of highlighting, how they use that, they've used research, their position of research to really like make shit ugly.
Interesting how you they'll take a lot of, even going back to the myths and legends sort of thing, that they'll put that into book of myths and legends. So a lot of Māori people grow up, oh no, that's not real. This Bible is real, but this book here about our own gods is not.
Even I was in a thing the other day, and even the arts. So like the early painters that came here and painted our and I'm going back to the navigation stuff. But they painted our ancestors coming over on Waka as dire, skin and bone, that they just landed here. So that completely discounted all of our knowledge about navigation for years and years and years, to the point where our own people were even teaching our own that, And so positionality is huge.
So moving on to the next point. We're going to be talking about tapu, or stuff that shouldn't be shared when we're doing research. So it goes to here, page 21. However, it might mean that the researchers do not record certain types of data, or that they may change their research project to meet local concerns. So what he's talking about here is going actually into the field of research, or going into, say, from a Māori view, like an iwi, to do research. There's some kōrero is quite tapu, talking whakapapa and stuff, like which stuff should be written down or which stuff should be, kept to the iwi. You just want to talk about a bit on...
Well, you guys, it was interesting that you brought up that whakapapa because you guys were talking about it before, pre-planned.
Practice one.
But I was like Carmen's whakaaro about that, like whānau posting whakapapa on Facebook, but then actually in the Māori land court, whānau recording whakapapa for that process. I found that quite interesting. Yeah,
it's sort of that law versus law, right?
Yeah.
LAW versus LORW.
Yes,
you have to give out your whakapapa in Māori land court to get your land. But then if you look through the colonised process, but if you look from a Māori tikanga process, that's sort of stuff that you shouldn't be just telling everybody. Because they'll know who you relate to, and that's how, Pay 74, that's how you get killed back in the day.
Well, actually, I'm dealing with this thing, so I've got a rare genetic disorder in my whānau, right? And we count all of our whakapapa where it sort of stems from. And they were giving, samples of our blood and all this stuff to the scientists back in the 80s. So this is my own whānau doing this, and like it's been life-saving, actually. My son, so thanks to all that research, my son had chemo and a bone marrow transplant to save his life. But there's this fine line between sort of when some of these other knowledge systems actually help us, but then when some of these knowledge systems actually damage us. So our whakapapa exists in medical places, where they're able to say whatever they want about us without our doing, because, we hand it over to gain some. So that tapu has been, I don't know.
Yes, it's that never-ending battle, right? To record it, or to let people know, or not to let people know.
It's almost like on one sense you got like a karanga aitua, and then you're asking for trouble. Then on the other side, you do it, to give life and save life. Interesting.
How do you even manage that? And then so you have those things happen, and then you have like whānau that are like, oh, okay, we can do all this stuff now. We can just go out and just plaster all of our stuff everywhere, and we can put Te Reo Māori all over Facebook and internet and all these things, and then Google can use a translator and mess it all up. Like, we put ourselves out there in their space, but then when it comes back on us in bad ways, like with Google Translate, for example, now people are putting up all these things that are actual wrong. Then we're like, wow, okay.
Maybe we shouldn't be doing that. I think that's us. A couple of little kōrero on our thing, Tēnā kōrua. Pai watu.